Funk and I'm here with Marianne Hobbs at XFM in Manchester, a very old friend of mine from my days back at Radio 1. Hello Mary, how are you?
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Have you missed me?
Oh, terribly, dreadfully. Yeah.
I've missed me too.
The last time I saw you, I think it was 2007 at Sonar Festival, and you were raving down the front of my gig.
Well, I didn't expect to be, because I'm a techno snob and I went to Sonar to listen to techno and found myself in the dubstep arena and the outside arena on the bumper cars.
Yeah, that's right. What an extraordinary night that was too. It was the first year that we actually took dubstep up to Sonar Festival, and I think all of us had expected, if we pull a couple of hundred people, it'll be a real victory. It was the first time that we took it out of Croydon and DMZ and forward and onto an international stage, And when we got there, I remember Scream absolutely panicking, and he turned around to me and said, "Have you seen the size of this place? It's gigantic. This is the sort of stage that Faithless would play. There's space for 10,000 people here. You must be mad." But, I just remember the most astonishing night. I remember the guy who warmed up for us was a local Spanish guy, and he was playing old school dub music, and he must have been playing to about 20 people. And we really hadn't got the faintest idea what had happened that night. But when I stepped up, I'd only been playing for about 10 minutes, and all these rivers of bodies started to pour into the arena. And Code 9 came running up to me and he just shook me by the shoulders and he was like, they're coming, can you believe it? They're actually coming to hear us play. And by the end of the night, we had 10,000 people raving to dubstep at Sonar Festival for the very first time, and you were down the front.
Yeah, I loved it. It was a very brave thing to do that, I think, because, obviously, my background's techno, but I know a lot about music, and I'd never even heard of dubstep until 2007 when I did my Radio 1 show with Plastician. So I think taking that sort of sound to a bunch of very elitist techno and that sort of stuff, it was a really brave thing to do, but it definitely worked.
Yeah, it was. I remember talking to Scream directly after it, and he said to me, "This is my greatest night on earth, bar none. I'm 21 years old and I've never experienced anything like this." And it's funny because he came back this year to headline with Magnetic Man, and I saw him just before they played, and he said to me, "God," he's like, "this takes me back to 2007. The hairs are standing up on the back of my neck, because this is where it all started. This is where we suddenly realised this sound had got real potential.
Yeah.
It had got a global audience, and it had got a massive future." It was the first real test, I think, that year at Sonar in 2007. Just absolutely incredible. I don't think I'll ever experience anything like it in my entire life,
Yeah, I don't think half the people that enjoyed it would have expected to enjoy it like me. For one, I just, like I said, I had no idea what it was, and I think you converted quite a lot of people that year. I think with your show and then the likes of Plastician coming into New DJs We Trust, the sound started to get around. Now, obviously, way back when, if we go back to the beginning, you started in music journalism and stuff. How did the transition then come into radio presenting and DJing?
Right, yeah. My story's quite an interesting one, actually. I mean, it's pretty well documented that I set out in an egg packing factory, a stinking rancid place, earning the princely sum of £39 a week, and then it's a very long story, but the shortcut is I ran away to London. And I lived on a bus for a year with a band in a car park in Hayes in Middlesex, a band called Heretic. We used to live in this broken down old coach that we used to call the Blue Goose Hotel. And we all did crappy factory jobs and saved all our money so that we could fix up this broken down bus and go on tour. And I was the band's lighting engineer. I used to design their costumes and paint their backdrops and do their artwork. And I was also the chief bus mechanic. And I remember sending the most demented CV that the editor of Sound's music paper must have ever seen in his entire life into him. But something must have really captured his imagination about this mad 18-year-old kid who was living on a bus, And he gave me an opportunity, he gave me a break to start writing freelance for Sounds, which was, it's kind of like the equivalent of NME today. Yeah. And then I got poached by NME after I'd spent a year out in Hollywood, living in a garden shed, riding around on a bikini and a motorbike, as you do, exploring the sort of the dark underbelly of the rock scene in Hollywood at that time, which was really fascinating. I mean, bands like Jane's Addiction were first breaking, I remember this amazing night going to an old school downtown warehouse rave and Perry Farrell strutting out on stage in a rubber corset with dreadlocks right down to his backside and just never heard anything like it before in my entire life, really. And I remember seeing Guns N' Roses way before they were ever signed, playing at a little, grotty little club called the Troubadour, and the thrash metal scene was really big out there at that point as well. So you had bands like Metallica and Megadeth really doing some damage.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, fully. So when I got back to the UK after a year of living in a garden shed in Hollywood.
Do you only live in places with no central heating or toilets?
I seemed to do a lot of that when I was a kid, actually. I don't think I could stomach it now. It's really tough, let me tell you, living on a bus in January. God, yeah. Jesus Christ. But when I got back, NME were sort of still very much in writing about Marxist politics, really. I didn't really understand what NME was going on about, which is why I chose Sounds principally as my paper of choice back in the day. But they suddenly realised like they really needed to get somebody who knew about rock music, so they took me on board. And then as a consequence of working at NME, I got offered lots of little bits and pieces on radio, just contributing to other people's shows, and then XFM came about. I mean, it was originally a pirate station, and Chris Parry, who actually managed The Cure and owned Fiction Records, cool, sold his entire collection of yachts and boats. He used to have a massive collection of boats, but he sold all his boats so that he could fund XFM, because he really believed in the notion that you could change the way that people listen to music, with a radio station that was alternative. And back in the day in the UK, this is 20 years ago, we just didn't have anything like that. And it really felt like the revolution being involved with XFM. It was fantastic, and I was broadcasting there for 5 years for free, just because I believed so much in that power of communication. And basically then from as a consequence of being there for that time, I then got poached by Radio 1 to go and work for them after a particularly confrontational interview with the head of production at Radio 1, who came into my XFM show, actually. I was really furious because obviously, we were only broadcasting for a month at a time in those days, and I thought, why the flipping heck should I have to interview this guy? He's running a 24-hour national network. If he wants to piss around playing records, surely he can find a window of opportunity on Radio 1 to do that. Anyway, the boss at XFM was adamant that he had to come on my show. And as a consequence, I'd set up this brilliant live session with Mudhoney, who were one of the big Seattle bands of the day. And I lost that because this guy from Radio 1 was coming in. So at that time, I was writing for NME. And in those days, the interview style was very, very confrontational. And I was fuming about losing the Mudhoney session. So I literally dragged him over the small tuft of hair that he had over hot coals by this tuft of hair, and everybody at the BBC thought it was hilarious that this little upstart, this jumped up little girl, was giving him such a hard time. And this interview ended up getting bootlegged around the BBC, and it found the desk of Matthew Bannister, who was the controller of Radio 1 of the day. He actually thought he was going to be listening to demos for new radio shows, and accidentally put my tape of my interview with Trevor Dann into the machine and listened to it, and rang Trevor and said, "We've got to get this girl." And so that's the story. That's how it worked. Yeah.
How did you make the move then from rock music into like electronica?
You know what? It was roundabout. I was a fully paid up rock chick. Weaned on punk, really into sort of avant-garde rock and metal when I was growing up, but it was round about the time that Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses broke, and the whole Hacienda scene began to happen, and I think that scene was the scene that was really responsible for getting kids who were my age, who'd come from a much more traditional kind of band-based background. It built that bridge.
The two, didn't it? Yeah.
It built that bridge, and I have to say, like, we used to come bowling up the M6 every weekend, even though I was living in London at the time. We used to come bowling up the M6 to go to the Hacienda. All of us would pile into the Britannia Hotel, just book one room, like 8 of us in one room or something. And every weekend without fail we would come. And I think the Mondays and the Roses, their own music built those bridges, but then once you were inside that club environment, you started to hear acid house music, and that's where everything changed for me, really,
So when 2006, I think it was, when you started the dubstep show on Radio 1, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing the Breeze block, and then the management wanted to retitle it, so they called it the Experimental Show. And I guess really, it was always, the agenda was very broad, but I reacted to dubstep in much the same way as John Peel reacted to punk. Like, it literally changed the entire fabric of my show overnight when I discovered it. And it was funny because, like, if you listen to Peel's old shows from back in the day, you know, he was playing really, 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 you know, sort of indulgent prog rock, and then, you know, 25-minute Jimmy Page guitar solos and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden punk happened in London, and overnight it changed completely the entire trajectory of his programming, and that's what happened for me. I
got under your skin.
Completely. I mean, you know, it was one of those things where I was really conscious of the fact that a big night at Forward back in those days would be if 15 people showed up. You know, the first time I ever saw Scream play, there was 3 people in the room other than Scream, and that was Scream's girlfriend, Hatcher,
Agent,
and me, and that was it. You know, and I was really, really conscious that there was a tiny number of people involved at that point, but it was around about 2005 that I first started to really support the scene vociferously on the show, but I had such belief. I really had such belief.
Very instrumental in a lot of the exposure, like we say, like especially going to Sonar and stuff. Like, your input, I think, has been quite important. Do you think you've had quite a part to play?
I think I've always considered myself to be an evangelist for great music, and that's always been my agenda. And to a degree, the genre has been immaterial to me, really. I think what you identify with is with that real sort of primal sense of that spirit inside a piece of music that really touches the very core of your soul. And for me, in 2005, 6, 7, going into 8, you know, and then when the mutations started to happen into funky, it became really fascinating again, I think. But for me, in those years, it was absolutely dubstep that really touched me, you know, and it was so exciting to be such an integral part of that scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there were great days. I remember we used to, it was almost like a youth club mentality. We used to go to Forwards, and I lived alone in London at that point, but I knew that I could go every other Thursday to Forward, and I'd know every single person in the room, you know. And
community,
it was
yeah,
brilliant, amazing, and just going to hear, knowing that all the key producers would have cut new dub plates for that particular night or for DMZ, you know, just going to experience those new sounds for the very first time, cut onto dubs and played on these filthy, dirty rigs was just incredible. I mean, you know, really, really special times. Glory days for me, those.
Don't need a toy, another thing. It's time to grow for the game, so don't play.
So, I mean, obviously dubstep's everywhere at the moment. There's a lot of commercial elements of it in the charts, obviously, at the moment. Where's your sound sitting with regards to dubstep?
Do you know what? It's really, really interesting because a lot of people always ask me about Scream and Benga's career, and I will always say to people, you know what? Those boys, and Arthur too, who's part of Magnetic Man, they've worked their arses off for in excess of 10 years. They really have worked hard, and they deserve all the success that they're getting now. And I think Magnetic Man, KTB, those types of artists are building very, very brilliant gateways for a much broader audience to come through, and for a much younger audience to be able to seize hold of. And I think once you get beyond that gateway, there's a whole world of specialist sound that opens up to you. So I would say there's a place for everything, and certainly the artists who really deserve it. I mean, I'm absolutely elated to see, you know, Scream and Benga getting the success that they really, really deserve. And also when you look at artists like Burial, whose compromises absolutely nothing, and you think, in a world where most celebrities sell every sordid detail of their sex lives, their relationships, pictures of their newborn babies for thousands of pounds to the media, it's phenomenal for me to see an artist like Burial who just wants to let his music do the talking, to become so successful. And likewise artists like James Blake, who are really uncompromising in terms of what they're creating, and yet have found this gigantic global audience. And you know, I think James has sold in excess of 200,000 albums now, and he's out on the road in America. He's just about to go to Japan, and he's making profoundly beautiful music. And I think there's lots of other places that you can look towards to find artists that are incredibly successful and are opening up these really fascinating gateways for people to come across and find, like I say, this entire sort of spectrum of really beautiful sound.
Yeah, that's behind. It's just opening the doors, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So who are you really into at the moment? Who should we look out for?
Oh my God, that's a really tough one. If you want one name, one really hot tip, a boy that's completely melted a million hearts on my show in recent times, his name is Royce Wood Jr. He's unsigned, and he used to work in a cardigan factory.
What is it with you and factories?
Yeah, no. And he cut his teeth serenading old ladies in this cardigan factory, and it was actually Jamie Woon who rescued him. He now plays as part of Jamie Woon's live band, but he makes this absolutely incredible electronic music of his own, and he collaborates with lots of different people, and he's also got a beautiful singing voice. And I think if you like Jamie Woon, if you like Beryl, if you like James Blake, if you like that sort of quite avant-garde but with a twist, you would absolutely love this kid. Royce Wood Jr. Check him out.
Royce Wood Jr. Okay. So obviously you were at Radio 1 for over 10 years, and you've come back to XFM now. So you're back you're in Manchester, living in Manchester. What's the show about here back at XFM?
Well, there's a really serious mission going down at XFM right now, and that mission is to try to really bring some phenomenal music onto radio much earlier in the daytime. And obviously there are networks like Rinse, specialist networks, niche networks that do that already, and I've got maximum respect for those broadcasting institutions that are already in that game. But for me, it was very much a situation whereby I felt the show that I'd done at Radio 1 at 2 till 4 in the morning had really gone as far as it could possibly go. And I thought, we've had such significant successes with so many different artists that we've broken through that show. Surely these artists are now proving that it's time for radio to rethink itself, to redefine itself. And XFM gave me an opportunity to play the music that I love on a primetime platform.
Yeah, make it more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a specialist show, which is my Saturday night show. It goes out from 7 till 10, which is a total pure blue skies radio. I can do whatever I want on that show. And people who used to listen to the underground electronic show on Radio 1 would really enjoy it because the agenda is the same. But I'm also doing the music response shows on XFM on Monday to Thursday from 8 till 11. And I get quite a lot of input on those shows as well. Obviously, there's an element of playlist that goes in. There's live sessions, there are interviews, there's all kinds of different bits and pieces. But I'm getting a significant number of open play tracks, which means they're tracks of my own choosing. So again, I'm getting to pull forward a lot of music that I really love and believe in, and get it on at a reasonable time of day. Because I always think, audiences are so responsive. They want you to challenge them and test them. They want to hear this incredible music, but people don't often have the time, or the inclination to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, or go rooting around the internet trying to find, specialist music programming. But I'm really convinced that if you platform stuff and make it more easily accessible at an earlier time of day, people will love this music. And the feedback that we've got so far has been absolutely incredible. So I couldn't be more excited. So the mission at XFM right now is redefining radio, definitely.
But it's just having the bravery to do that, isn't it? I think some people would shy away, but they don't give people enough credit for what they'd actually enjoy.
I believe that's true. I think, there's the British of, I don't know, we're in a desperate situation where we're trying to dumb everything down. And I remember as being a young person, I wanted media that was really aspirational. I wanted something to shoot at and aim for, and something to challenge me and excite me and thrill me. And I wanted to hear about stuff that I didn't already know. And I think there's a terrible culture at the moment, a real gutter media culture in the press, on television, on daytime radio, and somebody's got to kick against it, and to me, I just, I always feel that it's such a great tragedy that Peel died as soon as he did, because, he was always my great inspiration. He was the person who drives me to do what I'm doing today. But even he was broadcasting at 10 o'clock at night, so it wasn't inaccessible. But I think as the years have rolled past since Peel's death, brilliant music has got more and more and more marginalised on mainstream outlets, and I'm trying to really change that, and XFM are backing me, and I couldn't be more delighted. So, big up Andy Ashton.
You're buzzing, aren't you? You're buzzing.
Yeah.
I spoke to you earlier about sort of what you're doing outside of XFM, and I think you said to me that you took a month off work and toured for a month, so it's not really taking any time off at all. So outside of your radio shows and stuff, what's going on with gigs and tours and things like that?
Yeah, I did a mad tour right across America in April and May. We called it the Road Warrior Tour, and I went out with Lorne and Take and Strange Loop and Gonja Sufi, and we just ripped it up coast to coast. And it was just an incredible adventure. It was really, really, really exciting. And probably my most memorable moment was going down to the breakfast room in Atlanta, just to grab some raisin bran, as they call it out there, at 7 o'clock in the morning, and being confronted with this massive sign on the door that said "No firearms in the breakfast room." And I thought, Jesus Christ,
Well, you can have them in the foyer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No problem if they're in the bedrooms or in the reception area, but not in the breakfast room. Keep it down.
That's inappropriate, isn't it?
But yeah, that was amazing. It was really fantastic. Nearly kills you touring America. I mean, you live on a diet of Pringles and Diet Coke and painkillers. Ordinarily, that's about it, But it does feel like a real road movie when you get there, just because of the nature of the way that America is, and it's everything that we've consumed as kids, watching films. So it does feel like you're kind of constructing your own mad road movie, which is brilliant. Yeah, it's really good.
So is there anything coming up gigs wise?
Manchester Warehouse Project tonight. I cannot wait.
Are you playing there tonight?
Yeah, I'm playing there tonight. Absolutely, cannot wait.
Come.
Yeah. Oh,
who's on there tonight?
It's a lot of the big hitters. I think Casper's doing a live show. Naughty by Nature are playing. Rodigan's up there. One Man is there, I think, in my room, which will be really exciting. Instrumental too. So it's a really, really tough night. It'll be fantastic.
You know what? I've never been, because I've always been a bit. I can't go to Warehouse Project because of Sankey, so I might have to break my Warehouse Project virginity tonight.
Warehouse Project is hands down my favourite gig in the UK. I just absolutely love it. I must have played there 5 or 6 times now, and just the sense of jubilation in that building is incredible. The whole setting as well, the way that they build the stages and the bars into that underground car park. I mean, it's so grimy. It's totally for real,
Brilliant.
So,
well, I might have to come down with you tonight.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for talking to us.
It's a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you very much. This has been Mary Ann Hobbs, and I'm Mistress De Funk.